Okay, so first we're going to cut out the circle. So you want your fabric to be folded in half and then fold it one more time to make a nice square. And then I like to fold mine in a triangle just so I know all my lengths are the same. And then the other corner has all of the folded edges. So I'm just going to evenly mark all the way across. So keep your measuring tape in the corner, and whatever length the edge of the fabric was, just mark it the whole way across to create a nice curved edge. And then go ahead and cut the whole way. And just a tip, you want to have 90-degree angles on each edge where you start. So then measure how long you want the skirt to be. So from your daughter's waist to however long, or if this is for yourself or whoever, and then measure from the bottom of the skirt up for that length so that the skirt's the correct length. And then you're going to cut that edge as well so that you now have a big circle skirt. And the wider your fabric is, the bigger of a skirt, the poofier a skirt you'll end up with. So I like to use really wide fabrics. So then just take a straight edge and mark along the edge of each while it's still folded. And that's the part that we'll put all of the lace in. If you want it to be wider, you can make it wider, but I like to do it while the fabric's still folded so that the angle's correct. So you're gonna hem across the bottom of the skirt the whole way, and then take your lace and just kind of lay it out so that you know how long you want it to be. You want it to be slightly gathered, especially if your lace is straight like mine was or flat. So just an estimate, there's really no right length or wrong length. And then do it again with the next row. You can put as many rows or as little rows as you want. I did 3 on mine. And again, just kind of gather however much you want it to look in the finished skirt. So then I'm going to start on the bottom one and just pin along that line that you drew with the straight edge. And then just gather the tops across and pin that as well so that it's gathered nice and evenly for you to sew across. And you can pleat these, you can gather it, you can do this however you'd like. Just make sure you only pin to the top part of the fabric and that you don't go through to the other layers because you don't want to accidentally sew the skirt shut. So just be really careful when you're pinning like this. So then you want to sew down the edges and across the top. And once you've done that, we're going to do the same thing with the next row. So line up the edges again with that line that we drew. And then we're going to go the whole way across. Again, pin it nice and smooth. Make sure you don't pin the bottom layers of the fabric. And then just for an example of how you complete them, to gather it like that. If you wanted to, you could even baste across the top of the lace and gather it so it's really, really even. However you want to do it is perfectly fine. Just make sure it's as even as possible. And then again, once you have all of this pinned down really nicely, you're going to sew down the edges and across the top again. So now the bottom 2 layers are done. So we're going to go ahead with the top layer. So starting at the top edges where we drew that line one more time, and then just pin across like we did with the other layers. Again, making sure that you don't pin any of the layers underneath. And then once that's all pinned on nice, sew down, see, and look, I pinned some of the ones below. Sew down the edges and across the top. All right, perfect. So now the ruffles on the front are done. So I just folded the edges next to the ruffles in about 3 inches. And you really only need to pin it at the top. And I put 2 pins to make sure both of the folds held really well, so both edges. And then I did the same thing on the other side. Again, I just folded it in about 2 or 3 inches and put a pin on each edge of the fold, the top fold and the bottom fold. That way it'll hold really nice and I won't bunch anything up when I'm sewing over it. And then you want to sew over the edges of it. So this next part's kind of confusing, but really it's not that bad. So you want to fold a well-fitted t-shirt in half and place it on the fabric to be the same length of the fabric. And then you want to take that straight edge that you folded it on, so make sure it's all nice and flat. And I left about a 1/2 inch on the right side of the fabric, so for seam allowance. And then fold that over again. And this new fold line, that needs to be the center. So then drag it out for that to be the center and keep that bottom fold in place. And then just get this top portion to be the same length as the shirt, or the same width of the shirt. Okay, so that's the same size. And I'm starting my shirt up a little bit. So the fabric needs to be at the waist, not at the hips. So then I folded the arms in so that when I take my scissors, I can follow the armholes so it has a little bit of a curve to it. And just follow across the whole way, just tracing along the shirt. Again, make sure it's like a well-fitting t-shirt so it's not bulky or anything. And then cut along the side as well. And you have this nice little bodice, fold it in half, and then take the one edge back out and cut across that. Because since you folded the fabric twice, you have like an extra back portion essentially. And then I'm just going to even up all of the armholes, the neck holes, everything like that. And then fold that in half, and where the front is, we're going to take it down about an inch and a half, just because the front neck is lower than the back neck. And again, just even up all of your edges really nice so that everything's even on both sides. So then if you open it up, you have the front and the back all nice. And I'm going to open my other fabric back up, and I'm going to cut out a second one of these. So I'm going to lay out my fabric really nice and smooth and use this as a pattern to cut a second one. That way the top is lined so we don't have any raw edges, and it'll just give it a cleaner finished look. There we go. First. So now we're going to cut out the straps and just take a straight edge and some scrap fabric and cut 2 straight lines so it's a nice even rectangle. I did cut 2 straps. I wasn't sure how long they were going to be, but they ended up being long enough to just use one. And you want to sew along the outside edge of it in a nice straight line, and then just turn that whole sleeve right side out. So I used a really big crochet needle because it had a flat end on one end. And then I just used it to kind of push it all the way through. And then just kept pushing, push. There's a lot of different ways to open tubes back up, but this worked really well. So once it's open, make sure you iron everything really well while you go. So iron it nice and flat. But then also it needs to be 2 straps. So cut it in half if it's long enough. Otherwise, obviously sew a second strap. So now we're going to pin this inside the bodices. So we have this facing right sides together if you have a pattern print. If it's plain, it doesn't matter. But we're going to pin these into that top front bodice shoulder seam. So the 2 center triangles, I guess. So pin it on the inside. And then we're going to take a pin, and about 1.5 inches down, we're going to put a pin. And so starting at those pins all the way across. We don't want to go all the way to the top. Turn it nice and right side out. Again, make sure you iron really, really well. And then that part that we didn't sew shut where we had those pins, we're going to sew that down. So we want it to be the same length as the seam, which is why I like to do it turned right side out, and just sew right across to fold those back the same length as that side seam there. So now that those are stitched down really nicely, let's see. So now on the other side, the same length as that side we just did, we're just going to push it back or fold it back about a 1/2 inch. or however long your side seams are, and sew those down on both sides. And now we can sew the edges and that top portion. And when we sewed that top portion, we have a hole on each side from where we sewed the sides down that we can loop that fabric through the straps that we made. And voila, it's like a little pocket for the straps. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. So now all of the bodice has nice seams done the whole way. Tie a cute little bow. Ta-da! And the top is done. Yay! So now we just have to attach it to the skirt. So with right sides together, I like to always start at the center and then pin my way out. So I like it to be just flat for the whole front of the bodice. But then when we get to the back, go ahead and do a basting stitch all the way across the top of the circle. And that just means you're going to widen your stitch length to like 5 so that you can pull the thread and gather everything. And just gather as much as you need to. I had really wide fabric. Mine was like 60-inch wide fabric, so I have a really poofy skirt on mine, which is what I wanted. So I had to do a lot of gathering. And once it's all gathered, however much you need it, you're going to pin the rest of the bodice. And you want to leave about 4 or so inches between the two back bodices. And we'll put some elastic there to make it easier to get in and out of the skirt. That way we don't need a zipper or any buttons or anything like that. And then as you go, if you need to gather it more, go ahead, or if you need to open up your gather a little bit, just make sure it's even. And then you see I left about 4 or 5 inches in the back. And then I took a piece of elastic that was only about 2 or 3 inches, and I pinned that to the right side of the skirt on both sides. And then when you sew that, you want to stretch it out to sew it, and you want to open up your stitch length, or you want to use a zigzag stitch so that the elastic will close back up. So then we turn it right side out, and we stitched down the elastic, and then go ahead and re-tie everything, and your dress is all done. Yay! I'd love to see pictures of how yours turn out. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. And then I gave my daughter a dress. She was really excited about this one. It turned out really cute. It's a fun dress. It was a fun thing to make. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. Bye.